It's now midday with the news. Alec Blackman.
A public inquiry is to be held into the breast cancer surgeon Ian Patterson, who was jailed for 20 years for carrying out hundreds of unnecessary operations across the Midlands. It'll start in January and will be chaired by the Bishop of Norwich, but won't have the power to force witnesses to attend. Kashmir Uppal's a solicitor representing many of Patterson's victims. She says she'll be keeping a careful watch over how the inquiry will operate.
We're just slightly worried that there's no compulsion on these witnesses because of the non-statutory nature of it, and to make sure that all the things that are listed in the document that issued by the government in terms of the range of the inquiry are actually followed through.
8:23. This is big news as well. A Worcestershire solicitor says the government's national inquiry into convicted breast surgeon Ian Patterson should lead to legislation to ensure that the situation can never happen again. If you remember this story, awful story, wasn't it? The Midland-based surgeon jailed in April for 20 years after being found guilty of 17 counts of wounding patients with intent. Yesterday, the government said that the independent inquiry would look at the circumstances and practices surrounding Patterson's malpractice and learn lessons from it. Bromsgrove-based Kashmir Uppal says what he did can never be allowed to happen again.
I'm pleased that the inquiry has been announced, and I want to ensure that it is a full, wide-ranging inquiry to cover the NHS and the private sector, and that the recommendations are followed through, and that specific structured arrangements for medical indemnity cover for clinicians in the independent sector, which turned out to be such a big problem in the civil case, is addressed, because unfortunately it's something that could potentially happen again if it's not addressed, and that the recommendations that arise in the inquiry do result in primary legislation to ensure that this kind of situation never occurs again.
Paula Gelsthorpe from Malvern was one of Patterson's victims. Morning, Paula.
Good morning, Elliot.
Presumably you must be delighted that this inquiry is going on.
Absolutely, yeah. It's long overdue, and very pleased at the news yesterday.
What do you want to see come out of this, Paula?
That this incident could never, ever happen again. It's how it went on for so long and why is still unanswered, but it can't happen again, and that is the must. It can't happen again. So
what do you think needs to change? Does the law need to be changed?
Yes. I don't think one person can be accountable, as Ian Patterson was. From what I can gather, he was a bit of a bully with regards to his colleagues. But nobody stood up against him, and that's a shame, because it could have stopped this at its early stages. But the law has to be changed so that no one person is responsible. It has to go to at least a couple of surgeons or a board on every patient, and I know that could delay things, but a slight delay is better than what's happened.
Are you happy with the actual details of the inquiry? Because it's not a statutory inquiry, is it? So that means that people they can't be made to give evidence, can they? It's kind of a voluntary thing that people turn up and give evidence. Would it have been better if it had been stronger and more legally binding?
It would have been better if it was a public inquiry. Yes, it would have been. But I think because of the publicity that this case has had, I don't think that would happen. I'd be very surprised if it did. But it would have been better if it was a public inquiry. But it's an inquiry, and if the law can be changed and this doesn't happen again, so be it.
And how are you now, Paula? How are things with you?
Yes, very well. Thinking about the positive, I was one of the lucky ones. I didn't have cancer, and that's what I have to focus on. And it will always be there. I've got a scar. I shall always be reminded, but we have to move on.
Well, it's psychologically quite damaging, I guess.
Very, yes, very, very. Not only for myself, but for my friends and particularly my family. We all went through it, and occasionally we still talk about it now, and it's a torment. It's as I say, I class myself as one of the lucky ones. At least I had a lumpectomy or 2 lumpectomies and not a full mastectomy.
Yeah, absolutely. Paula, thanks for having a chat to us this morning.
No problem.
There we are.
Thanks, Elliot.
Paula Gelsthorpe from Worcester, one of Ian Patterson's victims. The results of the inquiry are expected to be released in the summer of 2019. Obviously, we'll follow that one very closely. I'm sure we'll talk to Paula again in the future. Welcome to Friday. Hope you're well. 6 o'clock and the latest news now with Vicky Breakwell.
A Worcestershire solicitor representing dozens of victims of convicted breast surgeon Ian Patterson is welcoming the national inquiry into his malpractice. In April, Patterson was found guilty on 17 counts of wounding patients with intent, and he was sentenced to jail for 20 years. The inquiry launched yesterday aims to learn lessons from the case and help improve healthcare right across the country. It'll be chaired by the Bishop of Norwich, as Bromsgrove-based solicitor Kashmir Uppal explains.
He will have a good understanding of the situation, and his pastoral skills will help the victims who are in a highly emotional state. And then he has a panel to actually guide him, and the panel has technical knowledge, so it will include a QC who can guide him on the law, and then a surgeon who can advise him on the medical aspects of the claim.